Welcome to Writers Not Writing, a show where I interview authors about the ways they procrastinate and highlight artists who are using their voices to push back against fascism. I'm Benjamin Gorman, your friendly author in exile, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug does his best to try to make me sound better. Welcome to Writers Not Writing. You're going to enjoy today's show. And if you want a little more, become a patron of my Patreon, and you'll get access to an ad-free version of the show with a bonus segment with each interviewee. Even free members get that, but let's keep that a secret.
If I take my time.
Hail and well met readers and reviewers. I am very excited about today's show. I've got two guests. I have Walter from Antifa International and author David A. Campbell, who's somebody who has been engaged with Antifa International. Antifa International is going into their annual fundraising, and so this is an important time for folks to learn about this organization and the work that they do. And so, Walter, I'm going to pitch to you. Actually, I should introduce you both first. So, Walter is one of the members and organizers of Antifa International, and David A. Campbell is an author, translator, playwright. You can find he's the co-author of On Being Sentenced to the book's called City Time, On Being Sentenced to Rikers Island. He wrote that with Jarrod Shanahan. He translated Revolutionary Affinities toward a Marxist Anarchist Solidarity from the French. It's written by, is it Michel Löwy and Olivier Besancenot? Besancenot.
Pretty good. It's pretty good. Yeah.
And he's one of the authors of the play Death of Rasputin. So, David, thank you very much for being here as well. So, Walter, tell us a little bit about Antifa International, how it came to be.
Sure. Thanks for having us on your podcast. So, in about 2014, myself and some other anti-fascists were chatting on Tumblr, of all places. And we said, we know that there's like a lot of different activities going around the world, but anti-fascists weren't really connected with each other, sort of on a more global scale. So we want to set up a social media collective devoted to anti-fascism, which means that we would be reproducing news and stories about anti-fascist actions around the world that we heard about. We would do whatever we could to support anti-fascists around the world, and we basically just generally support the tenets of anti-fascism. So we started our little thing about 11 years ago, actually 11 years ago this month. And we went from one social media account with a few hundred followers to today, where our collective has 8 members in 10 different countries. We're on 9 social media platforms, and we've got an audience of about 140, 150,000 people.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been really successful. We're really happy with it. In doing that, we took on a number of projects. I think the project we wanted to talk about most today, because this month is also the 10th anniversary of, it's called the International Anti-Fascist Defense Fund. Because another thing we noticed quickly is that sometimes anti-fascism has consequences. Sometimes people get in some real serious life-altering trouble because they took a stand against hatred and bigotry in their communities. And we didn't think it was right that they were left to serve their own sort of ability to raise whatever resources they needed to defend themselves and make that problem go away. So we created a standing defense fund for anti-fascists, and it's designed to provide emergency aid to any anti-fascist that's in some kind of trouble as a result of their anti-fascist action. So we've been doing that for 10 years now. We've helped out over 800 anti-fascists in 26 different countries, and we've doled out just over $250,000 doing that.
That's amazing. And so
yeah, thank you.
Often folks who are running into legal trouble with the local police or the justice system in whatever country they are standing up, right?
For sure, yeah. And the overwhelming majority of cases we deal with are legal cases, where people either have to be able to hire a competent lawyer, or make bail, or pay court fines, things of that nature. Happily, we found that when we are able to intervene and get people good lawyers, they very often beat the charges or have the charges dropped. I was just looking at the numbers for the last year, And over the last year, we helped 15 anti-fascists either get not guilty pleas or have charges dropped in court.
Yeah, yeah. But so often the folks who are engaged in kind of persecuting anti-fascist activists don't want more attention to come to it. They want the person to go away, right? And so if you
That's
can
very true.
stand up for one another, then they back down, which is kind of
Well, the other
of our activity. That these folks don't want to actually be confronted. They want to steamroll, right? And when we stand up, they often back down.
Absolutely. And the other thing that like our opponents don't understand is the principle of solidarity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when anti-fascists are under attack, we stand with each other and we back each other up. We pack courtrooms and do whatever we can to help each other out. Fascists don't understand that because they don't have solidarity with each other.
They don't have solidarity, they have hierarchy. And they can't understand
exactly
could possibly be organized without hierarchy, right? They're like, oh, if they don't have a person in charge and then a person following orders, then they can't possibly stand together.
Absolutely. And actually, the Defense Fund, speaking of hierarchy, is a great example of how you can organize yourself without hierarchy. Mm-hmm. We operate on the principle that if you make a donation of at least $20, you're in and you get to make decisions about how the Defense Fund's used. So whenever we get a request or proposal for someone that needs help, we discuss it amongst that group of people. We call them the decisions crew. There's about 1,600 people that have been invited to join it now. And we take about a week to see if we can come to consensus on what to do about the request or proposal we receive. We usually are able to get to consensus, but sometimes we can't. And in those cases, we take one more week and we just decide by simple majority vote.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's wise to have a system that, takes that into account. Consensus is tough. For a while, back when I was at one point in my life, I was a Christian and attended a Quaker service, and they organized themselves around consensus. And consensus can sometimes be very, very slow moving. And so having some kind of
for sure
backstop system so that one person can't kind of play spoiler is wise. But yeah, as much as possible, I think it's a really laudable goal to try and get everybody in to that place.
Yeah, I mean, it was important for us. I'll be honest. Most of us in the collective are either some form of anarcho-communists or anarchists. So it was important for us to design the Defense Fund project in a way that matched our values of non-hierarchical decision making. And it's worked really well. Like having a deadline on the discussion period really works well. And typically we can get money out within a week or 2 weeks, which is usually more than enough time to get people the support they need.
Well, and really would make, I mean, when somebody chooses to get engaged, that doesn't mean they necessarily have a ton of privilege. That means they're willing to put their body on the line. And so I can imagine
absolutely
huge difference to have that solidarity and to have that rapid response. That's wonderful. So David, you were one of the recipients, correct?
Yeah, I was one of the recipients of support from the International Anti-Fascist Defense Fund, and I can tell you that it definitely works.
Yeah. So what was your story? Tell everybody that story. How did that come about? And then how did the fund, step in at that point?
Yeah, so I got arrested at an anti-fascist protest in New York in 2018. I got injured pretty badly, and I got arrested, and I got charged with some pretty outlandish charges. And a lot of them were actually very hard to beat. There are a lot of very draconian laws on the books that have, historically been developed and used to crack down on mostly working class Black and brown men when it comes to like group violence, right, and stuff like that. So they're happy to use those against anyone that they see as an appropriate target. And this was kind of a long running affair. I mean, my case, right, between when I got arrested and when I actually went to jail, it was about 2 years. I mean, I was in for 5 days when I was first arrested, but I was in a hospital, and I was bailed out, and I was able to fight my case as a free man until I decided to take a plea just to cut my losses. It was the least bad deal available to me. And so during that time, like my first concern was, well, like I can't really work, because I have a broken leg. I have all these medical bills, like I need to pay rent and like buy groceries and stuff. And right away, I don't even know who submitted me to the International Anti-Fascist Defense Fund. I guess one of my friends or comrades in the anti-fascist movement in New York. But yeah, right away, I got enough money to kind of hold me over while I figured things out. Um, and they were also very understanding that I didn't necessarily want to bring a lot of attention to my case. I didn't want it to seem like I was some sort of Antifa superstar, because that could maybe, inform the prosecution's opinion of me in a negative way. Um, I just didn't want it to necessarily be imbued with that. Now it turned out that the prosecution was very much gunning for me specifically because of that angle. But whatever, it was the sort of prudent move at the time. And the defense fund was very respectful of that. Used the pseudonym for the online fundraiser. And then when I decided to go away, I decided to take this plea, cut my losses, and I went away for a year. Came right back immediately. Started doing publicity work to drum up support, using my real name and my information. As I had asked. They were in close contact with members of my defense committee. I was getting various small donations during my incarceration to help me, just pay for stuff at commissary, and to have a little cushion for when I got out, because that makes a big difference as well. Regardless of what your plans are or your sort of employability, it's like you need a little time to get oriented when you get out of jail. It's a pretty disorienting experience, right? So yeah, so all that stuff, I mean, that it just fell into place. It's almost unbelievable how smoothly it worked. And I've obviously maintained contact with the Defense Fund folks since my release. I've done a few, events with them, because I can tell you firsthand, this is very effective. It's actually very simple, and it is based entirely on solidarity, right? It's people deciding to stand up and contribute. I think, you know, when we talk about the potential consequences of anti-fascist action, I mean, there are lots of things that could happen because there are lots of types of anti-fascist action. But in general, we tend to focus on sort of street level confrontations that can get physical and can get violent. And in those contexts, right, the main things are arrest, injury, and incarceration, right? And all of these things can happen to you at once, right? They happen to me. And when that happens, the state is generally taking this attitude of well, I'm going to have a crushing response, right? I'm going to have a clampdown that is so just disproportionate, right? That is so beyond this person's means to respond that they'll just fold, right? And that is, that's what the entire criminal legal system in the U.S. is based on, is getting people to take plea deals, right? This is essentially psychologically torturing people until they crack, right? So in that scenario, what the defense fund proposes is a way to scale up your defense, right? By saying, I have a lot of people who are willing to contribute these little building blocks. And then we can kind of we're in the same weight class, and you're you're still not really picking on someone your own size, state, but it's a little more even. The odds are a little more even. And it really does make a difference.
Oh, that's huge. Well, and I think one of the points you made, is particularly interesting to folks who don't know much about Antifa action, and that is your identity. And folks who are watching this on YouTube are seeing, Walter is camera off and your camera on. And this was something that was kind of, I had to do a lot of learning about this myself. I was running with some kind of black bloc folks in Salem and Portland, and that was something that was really respected. Some people shared their identities and some people didn't. And there was this, but I think that's hard for folks outside of it to understand. There are some people who need to keep their identities a secret. And there are some folks who make that choice to say, no, I'm going to use my identity if that is useful. Right. And so Walter, how does the defense fund navigate that kind of historically?
Oh, yeah, it's tricky. And I guess it's on a case by case basis, right?
Mhm.
I mean, some of the people we work with and support are very public about their anti-fascism and have no qualms about that. Pardon me. Others, for very legitimate reasons, need to keep their identities as confidential as possible. So we've had cases that we tend to report publicly on our blog about every case that we handle for the sake of transparency. But some cases aren't up there, and that's for cases where people had very real concerns about their identity being revealed. So It's really on a case by case basis. For me, I mean, two reasons. One is security. I don't want to be murdered by fascists,
Uh-huh. Right.
which has
Absolutely.
happened, which has
It is a
happened all too
genuine,
often to anti-fascists.
legitimate I mean, that's why I'm living in Spain,
Right?
right? Like you get to the place
There
where
you go.
it's
Exactly.
not safe
Exactly. You
for
get
everyone.
it. You get it.
That's
Yeah,
real.
but the other reason is like I don't want this. I don't want it to be about me. I don't want to be like David said, a superstar in anti-fascism. It's not about me. It's about the movement. So the more nondescript I can be, and the more we can be focused on what matters, I think the more important it is.
Yeah. Well, and David, you've kind of been on both sides of that. So how was that transition from, okay, my name is out there now. Like, like once it's, in public record, like, how did you make that transition to, okay, now I'm gonna do these events and I'm gonna use my name?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, for me, my name and all my like personal shit was just put out there when I was arrested. I had fascists trying to find me, on 4chan and Reddit and stuff, and like, um, nothing ever really came of that. But I did want to be prudent. I did want to be careful, and I did want to make sure, like I said before, that I wasn't sort of feeding the prosecution's preconceived notions about who I was or whatever. Um, because I felt that that could only hurt the case. At the same time, I knew all along that my stuff was out there, right? So like once I decided to take this plea deal, the least bad plea deal I could get, I was like, all right, cool. I got to do a year in jail, and I'm gonna need support to make it through this. I'm gonna need solidarity, and like, there's no sense in hiding this anymore, right? So like, this is who I am. This is the time that I'm doing. This is the reason I'm doing time. And if you can support me, please do, because there are many other people that are going to be in these sorts of situations moving forward. And because these sorts of things are cumulative, right? Like we have to defend each other across various interlinked movements in order to present a broad, flexible, strong front against the far right, which is, is attacking on multiple fronts at once, right? And
Yes.
pretty viciously. Since my release, I mean, I've been more um, I mean, I've just like accepted that I have a certain platform because of this event. I think it would be pretty easy for me to slink away and just go about my life. But, I mean, on the one hand, it's like I think it would be um, not disingenuous, but it would be a bit of a shame and maybe it would feel like a bit of a betrayal for like a lot of people I've locked up with, a lot of people that I was doing anti-fascist work with. I tend to keep my nose clean these days, but I'm still an anti-fascist, but I'm not doing like ground level organizing anymore because,
Different
but
roles. There are
yeah,
lots of different roles, right?
they're different roles and they're all valuable, right? So like I'm not in that role anymore because it's not
That was
something that I'm willing to.
I have to have a different role now. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a different role now, right? So like in terms of writing about anti-fascism and incarceration, which is mostly what I write about, like that's a thing where I feel like I'm contributing, I'm participating to abolition, to anti-fascism, by being public. And in some ways it's very simple. It's like I don't look or talk like a violent felon, right? Quote unquote violent felon, but I am a violent felon, right? Like that's a thing that people need to wrap their heads around, and hopefully you can help them start to break down these ideas about what violent felons are and how dangerous they are and things like that, right? Which in turn may lead them to reinterrogate some of their positions on the prison system in general. The same thing with anti-fascism. It's like, yeah, I mean, I think that there is a time and a place to put up a principled and sometimes physical resistance to the far right. And I'll tell you one reason is because they sure as hell seem to have no qualms about putting up physical resistance against whatever like perceived
Right.
injustice, they have whatever grievance they have with the world. Um, I mean, that was why I started training in like, martial arts and stuff. I don't know a ton of that, but like self-defense stuff because I was going to protests. And like people were getting attacked by fashion
Yeah.
because they're quick to do that. So
Well, this
yeah,
is
I've been on both sides, and now I'm like more happy using it would seem a loss to me, a lost opportunity not to be public with these sorts of things, right?
Yeah. Well, but I think this brings up something that I think a lot of folks don't understand about the nature of the far right and kind of the situation in which we globally find ourselves right now in terms of the way the fascist movement works. There is, the term stochastic terrorism is kind of,
Mm-hmm.
tossed around, but I don't think folks fully understand the simultaneously, you know. organized political structures that are fascist movements within the state, and guys on the street who are saying, I have been given permission to now be incredibly
Yeah.
violent because this is the way things are. And I think, those are hard for kind of lay people who are not engaged to understand those two things are happening simultaneously. And so it is totally legitimate to be very concerned about the crazy Proud Boy guy who on his own decides I'm going to go after this one anti-fascist whose address I heard about, and to be concerned about the state. And maintaining your anonymity is challenging when the state is involved. That's. Hey, readers and reviewers. I want to put out an all call for guests who are fighting back against fascism. If you know an author or artist of any kind who is using their art or their platform to push back, especially if they are doing so in an interesting way that deserves more attention and support, share this show with them and encourage them to email NotAPipePublishing at NotAPipePublishing@gmail.com, and we'll get them scheduled. And if you're looking for inspiring or practical ways you can push back, be sure to subscribe to the show so you catch all the great guests folks are going to recommend. See you here each week. Fascist purges always begin with books. If you can't imagine a better future, you'll never fight for one.
At a time when oligarchs and politicians are trying to divide us, to scare us, to silence us, it's more important than ever to speak up, even when it sometimes feels like screaming into the void.
Celebrations of established foundations all of a sudden screeching, discordant, as the preachers become ignored by the God they adore, pathetic and
anti-fascist literature is one way we fight back against the rising tide of hatred and ignorance that seeks to drown the sparks of empathy, community, and curiosity that are the birthright of all human beings.
And then maybe you understand. Never let them silence your voice. Never let them push you down. And never forget that your mommy loves you.
Through our stories and poems, we articulate our love for each other, our desire for justice, our need for freedom, and our determination to make a stand.
The seductive depths of the ocean are more appealing than physical contact with either of them. A mental stream of David Attenborough narration carries her through the awkwardness. Here, the larger of the two apex
Volume
predators
1, the Antifa Lit Journal, begins with Rachel A. Rosen's brilliant What If We Kissed While Sinking a Billionaire's Yacht, and takes the reader on a journey through rage, fear, and despair to a place of grace, hope, and motivation.
Fascists are like bindweed and blackberry in the garden. You can't eradicate them, but if you stay on top of your reading, you can keep them from taking over.
By itself, it's not enough, but no single effort is. We must come together and embrace one another.
Media. The Enriquez kids came to my daycare until their dad got disappeared, Dolores said. Where were the signs and the singing when my brother died?
Protest. Boycott, strike, demand your representatives do more, protect the vulnerable, and support the people who are fighting alongside you through their art.
The kind who sits comfortably where evil meets idiocy and drinks up what he's fed through tubes painted red like the doors of those they tell us are better off dead.
Back our Kickstarter and help us make the Antifa Lit Journal into the kind of community that will outlast the current fascist regime. Fight fascism with your voice while you still can.
Yeah.
So, Walter, what have you, as we have been seeing this rise of the right? I mean, I'm even hesitant to say rise of the right. Communities of color, our queer siblings have been dealing with right-wing fascism forever, right? But
right.
There is a rise of the right in terms of its acceptability. That was something that people were, people weren't wearing their swastika tattoos and becoming Secretary of Defense, right? Not public in a way that should be getting people's attention. And so what are you seeing about this time we're living in right now?
I mean, it's wild. There used to be a time when a big weapon we had to use to fight against fascism was that fascists were ashamed of being fascists. They weren't public about it. They knew that they had to keep their fascism a secret because there would be serious consequences for them if they were public. Now, people are unabashedly fascist. I think it's no longer up for debate that the President of the United States of America is a fascist. Mm-hmm. So the largest economy in the world and the most powerful military in the world is under control of a fascist, and we've seen what's happening right now.
Yeah.
So it's a really scary time. This is probably, fascism is more ascendant now than at any point that I've been alive.
Yeah.
So it's pretty scary.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we are seeing some pushback on it. Trump was elected in November. Things started to go bad right after he's inaugurated. But since then, there's been other national elections in other countries where there were similar far-right or fascist candidates that were leading, large established political parties who were roundly rejected by the electorate. I'm thinking of Australia. I'm thinking of Canada. I think there's been some other ones as well.
Yeah.
So, in a way,
hopefully in Germany,
what
a little bit,
Yeah. Right. So in a way,
Portugal
I think,
and Poland's recently went for center right instead of far right, but I mean it's not great, and
Right,
I think at least in
it's not
Poland
great.
they may end up building a coalition with the far right, but it's I mean at least it's not just like a slam dunk for the far right worldwide. There seems to be some
Yeah.
hesitation about it at the electoral level, right? People seem to be
Yeah.
seeing those people in the States, for example, who are having buyer's remorse about Trump, and wondering if, they might feel dumb, just like this person feels dumb if they elected the far right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
kind of my guess, but
Well, and it's hard for
yeah,
those of us, where we are politically. I'm looking at it, I'm going, okay, you're having buyer's remorse because the cost of eggs didn't go down. Really? That's the thing for you? It's, the
Right.
economic consequences, and not the fact that your neighbor is getting taken off to El Salvador in prison, but
Yeah.
at least it's something.
It
Yeah.
is something. You got to start somewhere, I guess.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is, I think a lot of people are seeing now that, for years, anti-fascists were always told, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. It's not a serious threat. We should be focused on other things. And no one says that to us anymore. It's clearly a very serious existential threat for all of us.
Yeah, the gas,
and I think
that's true, because I got
exactly.
You are overreacting. It's gonna be fine. That has stopped.
Yeah.
That is true. That is true.
I think, I don't know how long you guys have been involved in anti-fascist work, but like for me, it was a thing I was never involved in before 2016. I think I went to my first like public, no to Trump as an as a presidential candidate march, and we got pepper sprayed by the NYPD for like nothing at all. And was like, oh, they really don't like this. Like, this is probably going to be a thing that goes on for a while, right? But so like, I didn't start to get involved until 2016, and it was clear to me that like there was something that had changed in kind of the calculus of our society to where we all put on these sort of selective blinders, and you could take them off. You say it's like, I know what's going on in Gaza, what's going on in South Sudan or whatever, but I can't deal with everything at once. Like mentally, I don't have the money, I don't have the energy, right? But like you kind of pick the things that matter the most to you, and you don't deny the importance of other causes, right? But we all do this because we have to make it through the very complex, very messy, very, very brutal world that we live in, right? And like that's fine, right? At the same time, I think there's something to be said for recognizing when you need to shift gears, right? And you're no longer able to call yourself like a decent, normal participant in a decent and diverse society unless you're defending that because it's under attack, right? And these are the sorts of things that went through my head as I was deciding to get involved. So, like in the 90s, the early 2000s or whatever, people who are doing anti-fascist work, more power to them, right? But I did not feel compelled to get involved at the time because the stakes were different, because the sort of calculus was different, right? And I think now it is very different from those time periods, right? That's one of the things that got me involved.
Right. Well, and I don't know if you both have had this experience. One of the things that I have to kind of check myself on is I think whenever you realize I need to get involved, it's always too late. Like as soon as I get involved, I should have, why was I not screaming about Gaza before the election? Right?
Yeah, totally.
On Trump, that I was so worried that I wasn't willing to also be screaming about Palestine. And so, whenever you come to it, then you will be filled with some regret. And what that helps me remember when I check myself is when somebody comes to it, instead of saying to them, oh, finally, like, no, we all come to this too late. We all are recognizing, oh, now I'm getting involved. I wish I had gotten involved earlier, but now is when you were needed. There was this wonderful activist. I'm blanking on her name. It wasn't Hannah Arendt. I'm trying to remember. She was out of Myanmar, I believe, and she was pointing out you will never have more power to stop Donald Trump than you have today. Tomorrow
Wow.
you'll have less.
Yeah.
Next day you will have less, and then you're in the Philippines or Myanmar.
Yeah.
Or,
Very true.
Yeah.
And so when people choose to get involved, they will wish they got involved a day earlier. And that's just the way.
Very true.
Yeah.
Oh, yep. Ben, are you still there?
Oh, yeah. 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 So, Walter, you were going to say, I'm sorry, I was
Oh.
talking over you there. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's fine. No, I was thinking about like the other problems. Like, I think sometimes we get paralyzed with sort of the enormity and the complexity and the range of problems that like we're all concerned with. And I think it's important to just start somewhere and pick something you can do. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. You don't have to go out in the streets and punch Nazis in the head. There's thousands of things people can do, very simple, small gestures, no matter what the topic is, where if enough people do it, it has a larger effect. So we always get asked, what can I do to fight fascism? And we always suggest sort of small places to start. Start by looking at how it plays out in your local community. Who's targeted locally? Who's a victim locally? Right now, we're seeing a lot of ICE raids of workplaces and schools. So figure out how you can defend your coworkers and neighbors. Talk to them. Let them know that if they need to, they can stay with you.
Yeah.
Very small gestures that are very important. And if enough people do them,
yeah,
impact.
So figure out where you have an impact. We talked before. We got connected because I own a small press. We can put out a literary anthology, which is now going to become a literary journal that is just anti-fascist literature, because that's a community that I'm in.
Right.
So lots of writers.
That rocks.
We can do, right? If you have a community group that you can get involved in where you can have an impact, it's not small, it's collective action, right? It's finding a place where you can get involved. I do think we should, though, talk about one of the things that separates Antifa from other kinds of movements is the willingness to participate on the streets. And this was a for me. Like I was very engaged in peaceful protest movements before really summer of George Floyd. And then that was when I was like, oh no, I understand. I came to work with these other Antifa folks, and it was, understanding there does come a point where you have to take back the streets, and that gets the most attention.
Right.
Comes the thing that people who punch Nazis, that's a part of the work. But getting to the place where you understand that is a part of the work is kind of a transition point for a lot of us.
It can be definitely difficult for sure.
If you're looking for some like contextualizing examples and some more concrete ways to get involved at the scale that's available to you, you should check out Spencer Sunshine's 40 Ways to Fight Fascists. That's mostly up to date. I think there may be a new version. It was originally published in 2018. But it's available for free online, and it is literally just 40 different ways. Great.
That's a good. The Einstein Institute has a list of 100, which might be a little. Maybe 40 is a better start.
Right. Antifa International actually published a list of 30 actions, and we have a copy of Spencer Sunshine's 40 Ways to Fight Fascists on a resource website we run called deathtofascism.com.
Okay, I will link to that.
So, I mean, if people are looking for ideas, we got lots of ideas. You just have to look at them, find one that you're comfortable with, and do the thing, and then rinse and repeat.
And some of the ways are very, I don't want to say the others are active, but some of them are very active and kind of overt, and some of them are withdrawing support in creative and intentional ways. I am not going to spend my money with this group. I am not going to support this in this way.
Absolutely.
That's really important too, to be thoughtful about the ways, because we can't all dissociate from capitalism, right?
No.
And we resist
as much as we'd like to
in thoughtful ways, right? Yeah, I would love to. That's not something that's available to us. So how can we resist in thoughtful ways? And once you start to realize, like, oh, I am it's learning about it to learn how can I pull back my support in some ways for fascism because it's pervasive and insidious and sometimes hard to see.
Yep,
Totally.
that's all very true. And yeah, I think it's really important to try to sort of make conscious decisions about how you live your life and what you do and how you interact with people. And often you'll find, oh, there's connections here that I'm not comfortable with. And I need to consciously sever those connections in order to, like, you know, feel good about who I am and what I'm doing in the world.
Yeah. So David, you've moved. I don't know if I can mention where you've moved to.
Yeah. No, I live in France.
So how have you seen France, you know, in terms of what's going on politically there in relation to the fight?
Well, I mean the sort of dance between the far right and the institutional left here is much different from the US because there's actually an institutional left to begin with. Yeah, which is pretty cool. I mean, these things that we consider, well, probably not the three of us, but that we Americans unfortunately consider pretty radical, like you know, universal healthcare is the best example, or like decent public transit, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, those are just non-issues. I mean, even your most right-wing nut job here doesn't want to take those away. That would be stupid. You know, like that would just be dumb. Why would I do that? So like there's
the reason is the way they know the way people would react, which is the way Americans need to learn to react. They would shut the country down. And Americans do not know how to mass strike. Like you can all choose not to go to work, and you can close a country down. They know how to do it in France. Like if somebody
that was
here in Spain, you know, that's it. The country would get shut down.
Yeah, and that's I think that's my second point actually is that like their tradition of resistance in the street, whether that's through a more sort of mainstream like official call put out by the unions, or if it's more like wildcat stuff, you know, the sort of banlieue riots are famous around the world. You know, when the police, you know, kill some kid in the hood, the whole country tends to burn shit down for a little while. Right. And this is like a very deeply ingrained reflex that French people have a different relationship to, you know, for example, the May Day marches. I actually didn't go to the May Day march this year, but, you know, there's usually a black bloc in the front that's causing some mayhem, some little fires and stuff gets smashed. And you see a lot of older people more, not necessarily more buttoned down, but maybe more of the peaceful protest, permitted march sort of bent. And they'll just be making comments like, you know, I really don't agree with this, but what are you going to do? You got to have the 1st of May. You know, it's like in America, it would be like, well, what do you mean you won't sign this declaration disavowing all political violence or something, you know? Like you'd be strong-armed to disavow diversity of tactics. So it's a very different situation. Here, to wrap it up, the main concern is that the far right has been threatening to take the presidency in all of the last, I think, like 7 electoral cycles or something. And every time they get a little bit closer, the institutional left, the actual left, has not had a presidential candidate that's really attracted serious attention in a while. We have kind of the same problem in this regard that the US has, where there's like center that is right or far right in practice, but very progressive in rhetoric. And that tends to capture enough electoral votes, right? So it's really fucked up. So there's a lot of stuff going on right now where the far right is being normalized. Over the past 20 years, people talk about the Le Penization of public opinion. I translated the interview with this guy who died last year, Julian Terzic. He was one of the original Red Warriors. Have you ever seen that 1 hour documentary? Yeah, there's a 1 hour documentary on YouTube called Antifa Chasseur de Skin, which means skinhead hunter in French. And he did a lot of interviews and stuff in the years afterwards. I can send you a link to that afterwards if you want. But he talks about this. The Le Penization of public opinion. So Marine Le Pen has been very successful in laundering the image of the far right party that her father, who was a literal Nazi volunteer, founded. And mostly basing that on xenophobic rhetoric and stuff, and that seems to have increasing appeal. You know, it's really weird sometimes how it plays out. I mean, I've got friends and coworkers who tell me they come from small towns that historically have voted communist because that's a thing here, like municipal level, you know, whatever. The mayor's always been a member of the Communist Party, whatever. and now they're voting the National Front.
Yep.
Because those sort of baseline issues, like the baseline socialism, is just a non-issue. National Front's not trying to take that away, and people are concerned because immigration is increasing.
Well, and
Yeah,
that's
just wild.
that's what I'm seeing here in Spain is it's anti-immigrant sentiment. It is very racialized. We don't get, anti-immigrant sentiment to white guy. No, that's fine. It's
Yep.
anti-Muslim.
Right.
So there's this racialized anti-immigrant sentiment without a recognition, and this is something the far right, tries to kind of obscure, is the immigration is caused by Europe. Like, the United
Yeah.
States and Europe are causing the climate change that are forcing folks and the colonialism and the conflicts that are forcing folks to come, and then that is being used as a motivating factor to push the far right. And this is basic political theory, but the far right doesn't care about anything. Remember this, folks. The far right cares about nothing but power. They will be anti-immigrant if that's convenient. They will be anti-trans if that's convenient. They don't care about your issue. They will use your hatred and your fear, whatever it is, because they care about power. And then we look for consistency. Why are they not morally consistent? Because they are morally consistent. Power is the only objective for fascism. And right now, they're totally willing to say, sure, go ahead and blow these people up, but also if they come here, please elect us. And so that's, it is something for us to be very conscious of when we are talking to folks on the street. They're going, I am frustrated with the rents. You're right to be frustrated with the rents. That is a legitimate issue. It is not caused by the Muslim family that moved in. It is caused by our actions as the West making other places unlivable.
So I mean,
Yeah,
here's the problem though. Here's the problem that the left has, though, that our answers to what's going on and our solutions are complex and require some study and sort of thinking. The right chooses very simplistic answers for everything. The answer is always someone who doesn't look like you or is dissimilar to you is to blame for this problem. And housing's a great example of that. Like you said, in the city where I live, there is a vacant home tax. So if you own a home in the city, you have to pay a tax if no one's occupied it for the year. I looked at the numbers for 2 years ago, and something like 11,000 people paid that vacant homes tax. That same year in the city's homeless shelters housed 10,700 people. So clearly, it's not a problem these immigrants are coming to take our houses. It's that people are hoarding houses and not letting other people live in them. But to explain that, you have to do the research and explain the connection, whereas the right just says, it's these brown people coming here.
Right.
Yeah.
It's this simple knee-jerk, if I just blame them. We went to, this was one of those kind of disgusting incidences of racism. We went to look at a particular apartment, and the realtor was, we were saying we're so glad to get to move here to Spain, and we love the diversity and, all the various languages spoken. And she goes, yeah, but, and right away went, but there are these Muslims. They cover their faces so you can't tell which ones are committing the crimes. And we were just like,
that is a good way, a time-tested way of getting away with committing crimes. However, who was talking about crime?
True.
It's just so gross. We're just like, wow, So no place is perfect. The kind of grass is always greener thing. Like we came here not because we expected Spain to be, perfect. There are certainly, issues in France. Germany, the DFA is scary right now. Like so.
Right.
This is a global struggle, so thank you for the work you are doing. I think it's so important that we are in solidarity internationally, because there are going to be people who are going to need that support in the UK or in Ireland or whatever, who might not be able to find it locally, and they're going to need it.
Right. For sure. And it's not just like our project, it's your project as well. You're putting out like an International Anti-Fascist Anthology. So I think we're all scared no matter what country we're in. And when we're able to start collaborating with each other, communicating with each other across borders, that strengthens the movement exponentially.
Yes. Well, and so part of our little connection here is folks can get their copy of the Antifa Lit Journal by supporting the International Defense, the Antifa International Defense Fund. So tell everybody about the fundraising because that's coming up soon, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, this month is our 10th anniversary, so we haven't really sorted it all out yet, but we're planning to do a giveaway of copies of the first edition of the anthology in exchange for donations to the Defense Fund. So we're still working out the details, and I'll send you some links and stuff when it's ready, but that's going to be rolling out later this month for sure.
Great way to support some authors and poets and support people who are doing the work on the ground. You can do double duty. So if you're sitting there at home going, I don't know what action I can take, but I am worried and I am frustrated, your feelings are valid, and here is an action you can take. Please support the Antifa International Defense Fund, because that's doing really, really important work. And you get a great book written by some really good writers.
There you go. It's a win-win.
Yes, it's a win-win. Well, thank you guys so much for being on. I really hope that folks will donate to the fund and keep that work moving forward, but also go into the show notes, check out the fund and those resources, and get engaged in that way, because as Walter said, it is a non-hierarchical organization. You can get involved. And that's a good way to inform yourself. The more you get involved, the easier it is to get, informed. And the more informed you become, the more you'll want to get involved. That's the way that reciprocal relationship kind of works. So I encourage you to check that stuff out. Thank you guys both very much for being here.
Thank you
It's a real pleasure.
Ben. Take care.
If I take